Dr. Marcus Chen had always believed that war was humanity's greatest failure, a testament to their inability to solve conflicts through reason and diplomacy. Standing in the blood-soaked medical bay of the UAS Determination, watching another young soldier die despite his best efforts, he questioned everything he thought he knew about strength, weakness, and what it truly meant to be human. The Terran-Zephyrian War had been raging for 3 years, ever since first contact had gone catastrophically wrong. The Zephyrians, a technologically superior race of crystalline beings, viewed biological life as an aberration to be corrected or eliminated. Their weapons didn't just kill, they systematically broke down organic matter at the molecular level, turning living tissue into something resembling ash and regret. Marcus had volunteered for the front lines not out of patriotism or bloodlust, but because he couldn't bear the thought of young men and women dying alone, far from home, without someone who cared enough to hold their hand in their final moments. At 34, he was older than most of the crew, his prematurely grey hair and deep-set worry lines marking him as someone who had seen too much suffering for one lifetime. Determination was humanity's last hope in the Kepler star Virgo 42 system, a crucial staging ground that controlled access to 17 colonized worlds. If they lost this battle, over 2 billion human lives would be at the mercy of an alien race that viewed mercy as a fundamental weakness. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, barely 22 years old, had been brought in 3 hours ago with what the field medics called crystalline poisoning, the result of Zephyrian bioweapons that caused the victim's own cellular structure to turn against itself. Marcus had tried everything in his medical arsenal: cellular regenerators, quantum healing matrices, even experimental nanobotic treatments that were still in trial phases. Nothing worked. "Doc," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible over the constant hum of life support systems. "Am I going to make it?" Marcus looked into her eyes, bright blue like his sister's had been before the cancer took her, and felt something inside him crack. He had lost 47 patients in the past month, 47 bright young souls who had trusted him to save them, who had looked at him with hope even as their bodies betrayed them. "I don't know," he said quietly, taking her hand. It was the first time he had been completely honest with a dying patient, and the admission felt like swallowing broken glass. Sarah squeezed his fingers with what little strength remained. "That's okay, Doc. At least you're real with me. Most people, they lie to make themselves feel better, not to help the person dying." She died 17 minutes later. Marcus stood in the empty medical bay afterwards, staring at his hands. They were steady. They had always been steady, even in the worst moments. But steadiness wasn't enough. Technical skill wasn't enough. All his years of medical training, his advanced degrees in xenobiology and quantum medicine, his countless hours studying Zephyrian anatomy and physiology, none of it mattered when faced with weapons designed to make healing impossible. He was weak. He had always been weak. He told himself he was helping people, but the truth was that he had chosen medicine because it was safe, predictable, removed from the real, ugly business of survival. While others fought and died, he had hidden behind the Hippocratic Oath, using his role as a healer to avoid making the hard choices that war demanded. Commander Elena Vasquez found him there an hour later, sitting on the floor with his back against a medical scanner, staring at nothing. "Rough night, Doc." "They all are," Marcus replied without looking up. 47, Elena. 47 people I couldn't save." Elena sat down beside him, her own exhaustion evident in the way she moved. As the ship's commanding officer, she carried the weight of 800 lives on her shoulders, and it showed in every line of her face. "You know what I told the first soldier I ever lost?" she said. "I told him his sacrifice would matter, that we'd win this war because of brave people like him." "You know what he said back?" Marcus finally looked at her. He said, "Commander, I'm not brave. I'm just too scared to run away." Then he died. Took me years to understand what he meant, which was, courage isn't the absence of fear, Doc. It's not some noble emotion that makes you feel good about yourself. It's the decision to do what needs to be done even when everything inside you is screaming to stop, even when you're weak. Especially when you're weak. Elena stood up, straightening her uniform. "Captain's briefing in 20 minutes. We're getting new intel on Zephyrian battle doctrine. I need you there. I'm a medic, Elena. I don't fight wars." "You save the people who do. And right now, that's exactly what this war needs." After she left, Marcus remained on the floor for a long time, thinking about weakness and strength. about the 47 faces that haunted his dreams. Sarah Kim's words echoed in his mind. Most people lie to make themselves feel better, not to help the person dying. What if everything he thought he knew about helping people was just an elaborate lie he told himself? The briefing room was crowded with department heads, senior officers and tactical specialists. The holographic display in the center showed a three-dimensional map of the current battle zone, with red markers indicating Zephyrian positions and blue markers showing human forces. The red vastly outnumbered the blue. Intelligence suggests the Zephyrians are preparing for a final assault, Commander Vasquez began, her voice steady despite the grim news. They've been systematically wearing down our defenses for weeks, probing for weaknesses. Our analysts believe they're ready to commit their full force within the next 72 hours. Lieutenant Commander Torres, the ship's chief tactical officer, manipulated the display to show projected attack vectors. Their strategy is elegant in its simplicity. They hit our forward positions with bioweapons to demoralize and weaken our forces, then follow up with overwhelming firepower. Classic shock doctrine. What about reinforcements? Asked Dr. Bray. Elizabeth Reeves, the ship's chief science officer. Nearest fleet units are 6 weeks away, Elena replied. We're on our own. Marcus studied the display, noting the placement of medical stations and casualty evacuation routes. How many casualties are we projecting? Conservative estimates suggest 60 to 70% losses in the first wave, Torres said matter-of-factly. The bioweapons make traditional triage protocols largely irrelevant. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. The determination would effectively cease to exist as a fighting force, and with it, humanity's foothold in the Kepler system. There has to be something, Elena said, her voice carrying a note of desperation she usually kept hidden. Some weakness we can exploit. Reeves pulled up a different set of data. We've been analyzing Zephyrian physiology for 3 years now. Their crystalline structure makes them incredibly resilient to conventional weapons, but it also creates certain rigidities in their thinking processes. They don't adapt well to unexpected situations. Meaning? They're excellent at executing predetermined strategies, but they struggle with improvisation. If we could somehow disrupt their battle plan in a way they didn't anticipate, how do we disrupt a strategy when we're outnumbered 10-1? Torres asked. Marcus found himself speaking before he consciously decided to. We changed the nature of the fight. Everyone turned to look at him. He felt his throat go dry, but forced himself to continue. I've been studying the bioweapons data for months. The Zephyrians don't just want to kill us. They want to prove that biological life is inherently inferior. That's why they use weapons that turn our own bodies against us instead of simple disintegrators. It's psychological warfare as much as physical. Your point? Elena prompted. What if we proved them wrong? What if we showed them that biological life has capabilities they can't understand or counter? Dr. Reeves frowned. Such as? Marcus felt his heart racing, but pressed on. Adaptability. Sacrifice. The willingness to become something other than what you were born to be. He stood up and moved to the display controls, calling up his medical files. I've been tracking the progression of crystalline poisoning for weeks. The bioweapons work by introducing Zephyrian molecular patterns into human tissue, essentially forcing our cells to reorganize into their crystalline structure. Yes, that's how the victims die, Torres said impatiently. But what if they didn't die? What if someone found a way to control the transformation instead of just resisting it? The room erupted in confused voices, but Elena raised her hand for silence. Explain. Marcus's mouth was dry, but he forced himself to continue. I've been running simulations. If someone were to deliberately expose themselves to controlled amounts of the bioweapon while simultaneously using cellular regeneration therapy to maintain core biological functions, it might be possible to achieve a hybrid state, part human, part Zephyrian. That's suicide, Dr. Reeves said flatly. Maybe. Or maybe it's evolution. Elena stared at him intently. What would be the point of such a transformation? The Zephyrians' main advantage is that their weapons are specifically designed to be lethal to biological life, but a hybrid might be immune to their bioweapons. More than that, a hybrid might be able to interface directly with Zephyrian technology. You're talking about turning yourself into a living weapon, Torres said, his voice a mixture of horror and fascination. I'm talking about becoming something new, something they can't predict or counter. Marcus paused, gathering his courage. I volunteer for the procedure. The room fell silent again, but this time the silence had weight to it, as if everyone was holding their breath. Marcus, Elena said carefully, you're talking about something that has never been attempted. Something that will almost certainly kill you. 47 people have died on my watch in the past month. If there's even a chance this could save the rest of the crew, I have to try. The transformation process alone could take days, Dr. Reeves pointed out. Even if it worked, you might not be ready in time for the assault. Then we accelerate it. Use the emergency stims and neural enhancers. Push the process to its limits. That would be agony beyond description. Marcus thought of Sarah Kim's blue eyes, of all the other faces that haunted his dreams. Pain is temporary. Failure is forever. Elena studied him for a long moment. You understand that this isn't just about medical experimentation? If you go through with this, you won't be human anymore. You'll be something else entirely. Good, Marcus said quietly. Being human hasn't been working out so well for me lately. After the briefing, Marcus found himself alone in his quarters, staring at his reflection in the small mirror above his desk. The man looking back at him was unremarkable. Average height, thinning brown hair, tired eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had never been particularly brave or strong or heroic. He had become a doctor because he was good with his hands and had a strong stomach, not because of any grand calling to heal the world. But Sarah Kim had been right about one thing. Most people lied to make themselves feel better, not to help others. Marcus had spent years lying to himself about his motivations, his capabilities, his fundamental nature. He told himself he was saving lives, when really he was just postponing death. He told himself he was brave, when really he was just following protocols. He told himself he was strong, when really he had never been tested. The transformation procedure he had proposed wasn't just dangerous, it was a complete abandonment of everything he had ever been. If it worked, he would become something unprecedented, a fusion of human adaptability and Zephyrian technology. If it failed, he would die in ways that medical science couldn't adequately describe. Either way, the weak man he had always been would cease to exist. There was something liberating about that prospect. A soft chime indicated someone at his door. Come in. Reeves entered, carrying a data pad and wearing an expression of reluctant fascination. I've been running preliminary calculations on your proposal. The good news is that it's theoretically possible. The bad news is that it's also theoretically insane. But you're willing to help me? Against my better judgment, yes. Elena made it clear that if you're determined to go through with this, she wants our best science backing the attempt. Elizabeth sat down across from him. Marcus, I need you to understand something. If we do this, there's no going back. The cellular changes will be irreversible. You won't just look different. You'll think differently, feel differently, experience reality in ways that no human ever has. Will I still be me? I don't know. That's what scares me. Marcus nodded slowly. What scares me is staying who I am. Elizabeth studied him carefully. This isn't about the war, is it? This is about you trying to escape from something. Maybe. Or maybe it's about finally running towards something instead of away from it. She activated her datapad, showing him complex molecular diagrams. The transformation would have to happen in 3 stages. First, we introduce controlled amounts of the Zephyrian bioweapon into your system while using cellular regeneration therapy to prevent immediate tissue death. Second, we use neural enhancement protocols to help your brain adapt to the new cellular structure. Third, we attempt to establish stable hybrid physiology using quantum field manipulation. How long for each stage? Under normal circumstances, weeks or months. With the accelerated protocols you're suggesting, 8 hours per stage. 24 hours total. And the chances of survival? Elizabeth hesitated. Honestly, less than 5%. The human nervous system isn't designed to handle that kind of radical restructuring in such a compressed time frame. Most test subjects would die of shock in the first hour, but not all of them. In theory, someone with exceptional pain tolerance and unusual neural plasticity might survive the first stage. Surviving all 3 stages would require something approaching a miracle. Marcus stood up and walked to his small window, looking out at the stars. Elizabeth, do you know why I became a doctor? I assume because you wanted to help people? No. I became a doctor because I was afraid of death. I thought if I understood it well enough, studied it closely enough, I could somehow avoid it. I've spent my entire career running away from the one thing that defines human existence. He turned back to face her. Maybe it's time I stopped running. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, then nodded. When do you want to begin? Now. The Zephyrians could attack at any time, and I want to be ready. Marcus. Elizabeth's voice was soft. What should I tell your family if this doesn't work? Marcus thought about his parents, his sister's children, the few friends he had kept in touch with over the years. Tell them I finally found something worth dying for. Part 2. The Transformation. The medical laboratory had been transformed into something resembling a fusion of operating room and experimental physics lab. Reeves and her team had worked through the night to prepare the equipment necessary for Marcus's proposed transformation. Quantum field generators hummed alongside traditional medical monitors, creating an environment that felt more like science fiction than medicine. Marcus lay on the primary table, wearing only a medical gown and more sensor arrays than he had ever seen on a single patient. His vital signs displayed on multiple screens around the room, each one monitored by specialists who understood that they were about to witness something unprecedented in human experience. Last chance to reconsider, Elena said, standing beside the table. She had insisted on being present for the procedure, though Marcus suspected she was there more as a friend than as his commanding officer. I'm sure. Dr. Reeves approached with the first injection, a mixture of Zephyrian bioweapon material and human cellular regeneration agents. The combination was an abomination by conventional medical standards, a deliberate introduction of the very toxin that had killed 47 people under Marcus's care. This is going to hurt, she warned him. Good. Pain means it's working. The injection went into his primary arterial port, designed to distribute the mixture throughout his circulatory system as quickly as possible. For the first few seconds, Marcus felt nothing unusual. Then the fire began. It started in his chest, a burning sensation that felt like molten metal being poured into his veins. Within moments, it had spread throughout his body, every nerve ending screaming in protest as alien molecular patterns began rewriting his cellular structure. Marcus had thought he understood pain from his years of treating trauma patients, but this was something entirely different, a fundamental violation of everything that made him biologically human. Vitals are spiking, reported Dr. Martinez, the anesthesiologist. Heart rate 140 and climbing. Blood pressure critical. Hold steady, Dr. Reeves commanded. The regeneration therapy should kick in soon. Marcus felt his consciousness fragmenting as his nervous system struggled to process the transformation. Through the haze of agony, he could hear the medical team calling out readings and adjustments, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. His vision blurred, then sharpened, then blurred again as his optical nerves adapted to new forms of sensory input. Neural activity is off the charts, someone said. He's experiencing massive synaptic restructuring. That's normal for this stage, Dr. Reeves replied, though her voice carried notes of uncertainty. His brain is learning to interface with the new cellular structure. The pain continued for what felt like hours but was actually only 90 minutes. Gradually, Marcus became aware of new sensations, ways of perceiving his environment that human language couldn't adequately describe. He could sense the electromagnetic patterns of the equipment around him, feel the quantum fluctuations in the ship's hull, even detect the emotional states of the people in the room through subtle changes in their bioelectric fields. Stage 1 complete, Dr. Reeves announced. Cellular integration is holding steady. Beginning Stage 2. The neural enhancement protocols were different from the bioweapon injection. Instead of pain, Marcus felt his consciousness expanding, as if the boundaries of his mind were being stretched beyond their normal limits. Memories became more vivid, thoughts more complex, awareness more acute. He could process multiple streams of information simultaneously, analyzing the medical readings from his own transformation while simultaneously monitoring the ship's tactical status and considering the philosophical implications of his changing nature. This is remarkable, Dr. Martinez said, studying the neural activity displays. His brain is forming new connection patterns faster than our instruments can track. It's like watching evolution in real time. Marcus tried to speak but found that his vocal cords were still adapting to their new structure. Instead, he reached out with his expanding awareness and interfaced directly with the medical computer systems, causing data to scroll across the monitors in patterns that reflected his thoughts. He's communicating through the computers, Elena observed with a mixture of fascination and concern. Is that normal? Nothing about this is normal, Dr. Reeves replied. But his vital signs are stable, and the neural integration appears successful. Beginning stage 3. The quantum field manipulation was the most dangerous part of the... Marcus could feel the fundamental forces that held his newly hybrid cells together being adjusted, fine-tuned, optimized for stability. The sensation was indescribable, like being rebuilt from the quantum level up, every atom in his body realigning itself according to new principles of organization. Through his expanding senses, Marcus became aware of the Zephyrian fleet approaching the system. Their ships moved with crystalline precision, following predetermined attack patterns that had been successful in dozens of previous engagements. He could perceive their communications networks, their tactical coordination protocols, even the emotional states of individual Zephyrian commanders. But more than that, he could understand them. The transformation had given him insights into Zephyrian psychology that no human had ever possessed. They weren't evil in any way that humans could comprehend. They were simply following their fundamental nature, which valued order and perfection above all else. Biological life, with its chaos and unpredictability, represented everything they found disturbing about the universe. Final stage complete, Dr. Reeves announced, a voice filled with exhausted relief. All readings show stable integration. The transformation appears to have been successful. Marcus sat up slowly, testing his new body's capabilities. His movements were more fluid than before, more precise. His vision encompassed wavelengths of light that humans couldn't normally see. His hearing detected sounds ranging from subsonic vibrations to electromagnetic frequencies. Most importantly, he could sense the ship's computer networks and, through them, reach out to touch the vast digital infrastructure that connected human civilization. How do you feel? Elena asked. Marcus considered the question carefully. How did he feel? The concepts of emotion and sensation had taken on new meanings during his transformation. He was still fundamentally himself. His memories, his personality, his core values remained intact. But those elements now existed within a framework of consciousness that was far more complex and capable than anything purely human. Different, he said finally, his voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. But still me, just more than I was. Dr. Reeves ran through a series of tests, checking his reflexes, cognitive functions, and sensory capabilities. This is incredible. You're processing information at rates that exceed our most advanced computers. Your physical capabilities have increased by orders of magnitude, and according to these readings, you're immune to Zephyrian bioweapons. More than immune, Marcus corrected. I can understand them, control them. The bioweapons are just another form of Zephyrian technology, and this hybrid physiology gives me access to their entire technological infrastructure. Eleanor's expression shifted from relief to strategic interest. Access how? Marcus closed his eyes and extended his consciousness toward the approaching Zephyrian fleet. Through their communication networks, he could observe their preparations, monitor their tactical discussions, even influence their computer systems in subtle ways. They're planning to attack in 6 hours, he reported. 3 primary assault vectors, with bioweapon bombardment followed by direct engagement. They expect to overwhelm our defenses within the first hour of combat. Can you stop them? Marcus opened his eyes and smiled, an expression that now carried implications of crystalline precision alongside human warmth. I can do better than that. I can teach them something they've never experienced before. Which is? Fear. The next several hours were spent in intensive preparation. Marcus worked with Dr. Reeves to understand the full extent of his new capabilities, while Elena coordinated with the ship's tactical team to develop a battle plan unlike anything in human military doctrine. Marcus discovered that his hybrid nature allowed him to interface directly with both human and Zephyrian technology. He could access the ship's computer systems with thought alone, processing vast amounts of data simultaneously while maintaining full awareness of his physical surroundings. More significantly, he could extend his consciousness through subspace communication networks, reaching across interstellar distances to touch other computer systems. The Zephyrians' greatest strength is their interconnectedness, he explained to Elena and her senior staff. Every ship, every weapon system, every individual warrior is part of a vast network that coordinates their actions with perfect precision. But that's also their greatest vulnerability. How so? Asked Lieutenant Commander Torres. Networks can be hacked, and I'm now the ultimate hacker, Marcus demonstrated by accessing the ship's main tactical computer and rewriting its core programming in real time. optimizing systems performance beyond the parameters that human engineers had thought possible. Weapons systems became more accurate, defensive shields became more efficient, and communication networks became virtually unhackable. But the real advantage, he continued, is that I can make the Zephyrians doubt their own perceptions. Their entire military doctrine is based on predictable outcomes and overwhelming force. What happens when they encounter something truly unpredictable? We're about to find out, Elena said, studying the tactical displays. They'll be in weapons range in 3 hours. Marcus nodded and began the delicate work of infiltrating Zephyrian communication networks. His hybrid consciousness slipped through their digital infrastructure like a ghost, invisible to their security protocols because he appeared to be both friend and foe simultaneously. He could observe their tactical preparations, monitor their psychological states, and begin the process of psychological warfare that would define the coming battle. But first, he needed to test the full extent of his capabilities. Reaching out through the ship's sensor networks, Marcus made contact with a small Zephyrian scout vessel at the edge of the fleet formation. With delicate precision, he began introducing subtle errors into their navigational computers, causing the ship to drift slightly off course. The errors were so small that the crew initially dismissed them as routine fluctuations, but Marcus gradually increased their magnitude until the scout ship was noticeably out of position. The Zephyrian response was immediate and predictable. The fleet commander ordered the scout ship to return to formation, but Marcus had already anticipated this response. He introduced additional errors into the communication systems, causing the orders to arrive garbled and confusing. The scout ship's crew, faced with contradictory instructions and malfunctioning equipment, did something unprecedented in Zephyrian military history. They hesitated. That moment of hesitation rippled through the fleet's communication network, creating tiny delays and inconsistencies that Marcus amplified and exploited. Within minutes, the entire Zephyrian formation was struggling with coordination problems that seemed to have no clear cause. "What did you do?" Elena asked, watching the tactical displays with fascination. "I introduced uncertainty into a system that depends on absolute certainty. Watch what happens next." The Zephyrian fleet commander, faced with unexplained technical failures throughout his formation, made the only logical decision available to him. He ordered a temporary halt to the assault while technical teams investigated the problems. It was a reasonable response to an unreasonable situation, but it represented something that Zephyrian forces had never done before in human space. They retreated. "My God," Torres breathed. "You made them blink." "That's just the beginning," Marcus said. "Now I'm going to show them what real unpredictability looks like." Part 3. The Evaluation of War. The Zephyrian fleet hung motionless in space, their crystalline formations disrupted by inexplicable technical failures that their best engineers couldn't identify or correct. For a species that valued precision and predictability above all else, the current situation was deeply disturbing. Their weapon systems functioned perfectly in isolation but failed in coordination. Their communication networks carried orders accurately but introduced subtle delays that disrupted timing. Their navigational computers provided correct data but somehow led to incorrect conclusions. Fleet Commander Kethvar, whose crystalline thought patterns had never before encountered true uncertainty, struggled to process what was happening to his forces. In 3 centuries of military service, he had participated in the conquest of 17 different species, each campaign following predictable patterns of overwhelming force and inevitable surrender. Biological life forms were chaotic by nature, but their chaos followed recognizable patterns that could be anticipated and countered. This was different. This was chaos with purpose, unpredictability, with intelligence behind it. "Status report," he commanded through the fleet's communication network. "Technical failures are spreading throughout all ship systems," reported his chief engineer. "The patterns make no logical sense. Components that should be compatible are interfering with each other. Software that has functioned flawlessly for decades is producing random errors. Could this be some form of human weapon system? Unknown. We are detecting no energy signatures consistent with known human technology. Whatever is causing these disruptions appears to be operating from within our own systems." Commander Kethvar felt something that Zephyrians rarely experienced: doubt. The feeling was so alien to his crystalline psychology that he initially mistook it for a system malfunction in his own cognitive processes. Aboard the UES Determination, Marcus existed in a state of consciousness that transcended normal human experience. His awareness extended through multiple computer networks simultaneously, monitoring the Zephyrian fleet while maintaining oversight of human defensive preparations. He could perceive the growing confusion and uncertainty among the Zephyrian commanders, and he understood that he had achieved something unprecedented. He had introduced an element of fundamental unpredictability into their perfectly ordered universe. Their psychological profiles are fascinating, he reported to Elena and her senior staff, his voice carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship's computer systems. Zephyrians don't just prefer order, they're psychologically incapable of functioning effectively without it. Remove their certainty, and they become paralyzed by infinite possibilities. How long can you maintain the disruption? Elena asked. Indefinitely, as long as I can access their networks. But that's not the real question. The real question is whether I want to simply defeat them or try to teach them something. Dr. Reeves, who had been monitoring Marcus's vital signs throughout his infiltration of Zephyrian systems, looked troubled. Marcus, your neural activity patterns are unlike anything we've seen. You're thinking in ways that human brains aren't designed for. Are you certain you're still you? Marcus paused, considering the question with a depth of analysis that would have been impossible in his purely human state. Was he still the same man who had volunteered for this transformation? His memories were intact, his core values unchanged, but the framework within which those elements existed had been fundamentally altered. He thought faster, perceived more, understood concepts that human language couldn't adequately express. I'm more myself than I've ever been, he said finally. The transformation didn't change who I am. It revealed who I was capable of becoming. Elena studied the tactical displays, noting that the Zephyrian fleet remained motionless, but was clearly attempting to resolve their technical difficulties. What's your recommendation for our next move? Marcus extended his consciousness deeper into Zephyrian networks, analyzing their psychological and technological patterns with hybrid intuition that bridged human creativity and crystalline logic. I want to try something that no one has ever attempted in the history of interstellar warfare, which is, I want to have a conversation. The concept was so unprecedented that it took several seconds for anyone in the room to respond. Throughout human history, attempts at communication with the Zephyrians had failed catastrophically. Their psychology was too alien, their values too different, their entire worldview incompatible with biological life. Marcus, Elena said carefully, every attempt at diplomatic contact has ended in violence. They view biological life as an aberration to be corrected. How do you propose to change their fundamental nature? I don't want to change their nature. I want to show them that biological life has evolved beyond their understanding. Marcus began the delicate process of establishing direct communication with Fleet Commander Kefar. Using his hybrid consciousness, he accessed the Zephyrians' personal communication systems and introduced himself in a way that their psychology could comprehend. As a bridge between order and chaos, logic and intuition, perfection and adaptation, I am the one who has been modifying your systems. He transmitted directly into Kefar's consciousness. I wish to speak with you. The response was immediate and predictable. Confusion mixed with fascination. Zephyrians had never encountered a consciousness that could operate simultaneously within their ordered networks and the chaotic realm of biological thought. What are you? Kefar asked. I am what your species and mine could become together. I am proof that biological life can achieve order without abandoning chaos, logic without sacrificing creativity. Impossible. Biological life is inherently flawed, chaotic, unpredictable. Yes, Marcus agreed, and that's what makes it beautiful. The conversation that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. Marcus, speaking from his unique position as a hybrid consciousness, was able to translate concepts between Zephyrian crystalline logic and human emotional understanding. He showed Kefar how human unpredictability wasn't a flaw to be corrected, but a feature that allowed for adaptation, innovation, and growth in ways that pure logic couldn't achieve. More importantly, he demonstrated that the chaos of biological life could be harnessed and directed without being destroyed. His own transformation was proof that order and chaos could coexist, that perfection and adaptation were not mutually exclusive. Your bioweapons are designed to impose order on biological chaos, Marcus explained. But what if that's not necessary? What if biological life can achieve order through choice rather than force? Show me, Kefar demanded. Marcus reached out through the Zephyrian fleet's communication networks and began to restore their systems to perfect functionality. But instead of simply removing the chaos he had introduced, He showed how it could be integrated into their operations. Random variations became creative solutions. Unpredictable delays became opportunities for tactical flexibility. Uncertainty became a tool for adaptation rather than a source of paralysis. The effect on the Zephyrian fleet was immediate and profound. For the first time in their military history, they experienced the concept of improvisation. Ships that had been locked into rigid formation patterns began to explore new configurations. Weapons systems that had followed predetermined firing sequences began to adapt to changing conditions in real time. Remarkable, Kefar admitted, his consciousness struggling to process concepts that challenged 3 millennia of Zephyrian military doctrine. But it proves nothing. One individual achieving hybrid status does not validate biological life as a whole. You're right, Marcus agreed. But it proves that the potential exists. And if the potential exists, then perhaps the war between our species is based on a fundamental misunderstanding. Through his connection to the Determination's computer systems, Marcus was aware that Elena and her staff were watching the exchange with mixture of hope and disbelief. The idea that the Terran-Zephyrian war might end through understanding rather than victory was almost too incredible to accept. But Marcus could sense a shift in Zephyrian psychology that went beyond simple tactical considerations. Kethvar and his commanders were experiencing something unprecedented. Genuine curiosity about biological life. The demonstration of hybrid consciousness had shown them that their fundamental assumptions about the nature of order and chaos might be incomplete. What do you propose? Kethvar asked. A test. Allow me to work with a small group of your people to demonstrate how biological chaos and crystalline order can be integrated. If the experiment fails, you can resume your campaign against human space. If it succeeds, we will need to reconsider everything we believe about the nature of existence. The next 12 hours were among the most intense in galactic history. Marcus, working with Dr. Reeves and a team of volunteer Zephyrian researchers, attempted to develop a limited integration protocol that would allow crystalline consciousness to experience biological-style intuition without losing their essential nature. The process was far less traumatic than Marcus's own transformation had been. Zephyrian psychology was already adapted to network consciousness and systematic thinking, making it easier for them to interface with hybrid thought patterns. Within hours, the volunteer researchers were experiencing concepts like creativity, intuition, and adaptive problem-solving that their species had never possessed. This is unprecedented, reported researcher Telmuth, one of the volunteers. I am perceiving solutions to problems that I did not know existed. Ideas are forming without logical progression. It is as if my consciousness has expanded beyond the boundaries of rational thought. That's called imagination, Marcus explained. It's one of biological life's greatest strengths. The implications of the experiment rippled through both fleets as word spread of the successful integration. Humans who had spent years viewing Zephyrians as implacable enemies began to see them as potential partners in expanding the boundaries of consciousness itself. Zephyrians who had viewed biological life as chaos to be eliminated began to understand it as a form of order they had never considered. But the most significant change was in Marcus himself. As he worked to bridge the gap between two radically different forms of consciousness, he realized that his transformation was still ongoing. The hybrid state he had achieved was not a destination but a process, a continuous evolution towards something greater than either purely human or purely Zephyrian consciousness. I can feel myself changing, he told Elena during a brief break in the integration experiments. Not just physically, but psychologically, intellectually. I'm becoming something that neither species has ever been. Are you still human? Marcus considered the question with depth of analysis that encompassed both emotional intuition and crystalline logic. I'm more human than I've ever been, but I'm also more than human. The transformation didn't take away my humanity. It revealed what humanity is capable of becoming. Elena studied his face, noting the subtle changes that marked his hybrid status. His eyes held depths that seemed to reflect both starlight and digital fire. His movements carried precision that spoke of crystalline order alongside biological grace. But underneath the physical changes, she could still see the man who had volunteered for an impossible mission, because he couldn't bear to watch more people die. What happens now? She asked. Now we find out whether two species can choose evolution over extinction. The final phase of the integration process involved establishing permanent communication protocols between human and Zephyrian fleets. Marcus, working as a living translator between biological intuition and crystalline logic, helped develop systems that would allow both species to collaborate while maintaining their essential nature. The breakthrough came when he realized that the key wasn't to make humans more like Zephyrians or vice versa, but to create new forms of consciousness that incorporated the best aspects of both. Humans could retain their creativity and adaptability while gaining access to Zephyrian logic and precision. Zephyrians could maintain their order and efficiency while developing the ability to innovate and adapt. This is what evolution looks like, Marcus explained to the combined leadership of both fleets. Not the replacement of one form of consciousness with another, but the synthesis of different approaches to intelligence into something greater than the sum of its parts. Fleet Commander Kethvar, whose own consciousness had been subtly enhanced through limited integration protocols, understood the implications immediately. You are proposing the deliberate evolution of both our species. I'm proposing that we stop fighting over who has the correct approach to existence and start exploring what we might become together. The decision to end the war came not through victory or defeat, but through a recognition that both species had more to gain from cooperation than from conflict. The Terran-Zephyrian War officially ended 72 hours after Marcus's transformation, making it one of the shortest and most conclusive conflicts in galactic history. But the real victory was in what came after. Working together, human creativity and Zephyrian precision began developing technologies and exploring concepts that neither species could have achieved alone. Medical advances that eliminated most forms of disease and aging, energy systems that could power entire civilizations, transportation methods that made interstellar travel as simple as walking to the next room. Marcus became the first of a new kind of being, a voluntary hybrid, who had chosen to become something greater than what nature had made him. Others followed, both human and Zephyrian, creating a new form of consciousness that bridged the gap between order and chaos, logic and intuition, perfection and adaptation. Standing in the observation deck of a new kind of starship designed through human-Zephyrian collaboration, Marcus watched as the two fleets that had once been enemies worked together to explore regions of space that neither could have reached alone. His reflection in the viewing port showed a face that was recognizably human, but marked by the crystalline precision of Zephyrian enhancement. He was no longer the weak man who had hidden behind medical protocols and comfortable lies. Dr. Elizabeth Reeves joined him at the viewing port, her own consciousness enhanced through voluntary integration protocols that allowed her to process scientific data in ways that purely human minds couldn't achieve. "Any regrets?" she asked. Marcus considered the question with hybrid intuition that encompassed both emotional depth and crystalline clarity. He thought about the man he had been, uncertain, afraid, hiding behind his role as a healer to avoid making the hard choices that life demanded. He thought about the 47 patients he had lost, their faces still clear in his enhanced memory, but he also thought about what those deaths had taught him. That weakness wasn't a flaw to be hidden, but a starting point for growth. That the man who could destroy his weak self, not through denial or suppression, but through willing transformation, could never be destroyed by others. "None," he said finally. "The weak man I used to be died so that something stronger could be born. That's not something to regret. That's something to celebrate." Through the viewing port, the combined human-Zephyrian fleet continued its journey into unknown space, seeking new forms of life and consciousness to understand, integrate with, and learn from. They were no longer two separate species fighting for supremacy, but the first representatives of something unprecedented, a deliberately evolved form of intelligence that chose growth over stagnation, cooperation over conflict, transformation over destruction. And at the heart of it all was a man who had once believed himself weak, who had discovered that true strength came not from avoiding change but from embracing it completely, even when that embrace required the destruction of everything he had once been. The war was over. The evolution had just begun. Marcus Chen closed his eyes and extended his consciousness across the vast network that connected all the enhanced beings in the fleet. Through that network, he could feel the hopes and dreams of thousands of individuals who had chosen to become something more than what nature had made them. They were no longer purely human or purely Zephyrian, but representatives of a new form of consciousness that took the best aspects of both species and combined them into something unprecedented. In the medical bay where his transformation had begun, new volunteers were undergoing their own integration processes, guided by protocols that Marcus and Dr. Reeves had developed together. Some were human, seeking to enhance their natural creativity with crystalline precision. Others were Zephyrian, looking to add biological intuition to their logical frameworks. All of them were choosing to become something greater than what they had been born to be. The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others, Marcus said quietly, remembering the ancient wisdom that had guided his transformation. But I think there's more to it than that, such as, Elizabeth asked. The man who destroys his weak self discovers that weakness was just another word for potential. And potential, once realized, becomes infinite. As the fleet continued its journey into the unknown, Marcus felt a deep sense of satisfaction that went beyond personal achievement. He had saved not just the crew of the Determination, but two entire species from the mutual destruction that had seemed inevitable. More than that, he had opened a door to forms of consciousness and ways of being that neither humans nor Zephyrians had ever imagined possible. The weak man he had once been was gone forever, destroyed not through violence or denial, but through willing transformation into something greater. And in that destruction, something unprecedented had been born. A bridge between order and chaos, logic and intuition, perfection and adaptation. The war had ended not with victory or defeat, but with evolution, and the evolution was just beginning.